Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is my first Books That I Read in a Month video, and I'm super happy to show it to you. I love books. When I'm tired, sad, happy, bored, reading or listening to books is what I prefer. And I like watching book videos and reviews on YouTube, or BookTube as it is called. So I've been wanting to be part of it for months and toying with the idea, trying to figure out how I would make it fit with the rest of my channel. And there it is. An illustrated wrap-up, which is something I've never seen before, by the way. So let's dive right in and see what I read last month. In June, I read 9 books, which is pretty great for me. First, I finished the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons with the 4th book, The Rise of Endymion, and I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. I started reading the Hyperion Cantos in March, and this was my first time reading this book series and this author in English, and I was instantly amazed by how well he writes. It's a brilliant mix of genres: hard science fiction plus thriller plus politics plus mystery plus horror plus romance plus philosophy plus adventure. In his postface, Dan Simmons says that he doesn't like to limit his writing in one sole genre, and I think he does it really well. I've loved the whole series, though I think the first and the third book were a little bit better than the second and the fourth, but that's just because I preferred the pacing and the stories in those. Objectively, the whole series is really well written and interesting, and it's called an instant classic. I'll give you a very short idea of what it's really about. In the first 2 novels, we follow the adventures, investigations and battles of a group of very diverse people sent on a pilgrimage to the time tombs of planet Hyperion to meet a mysterious creature, the Shrike, while the various human cultures of the galaxy are on the brink of war. In the last 2 novels, which are set about 240 years after the previous events, we now follow Endymion, a farmer from planet Hyperion, sent on an incredible and epic mission with a girl and an android to basically save humanity's future. And of course, the Shrike is still there and as frightening as ever. So I know those books are really dense. If you've ever looked at them, they are well over 500 pages each. But if, like me, you love good science fiction with a twist and extremely well-written epic stories, go for it. And I don't want to spoil you more about it because it's, as I said, so dense, so action-packed, so full of wonderful ideas that I just want you to grab those and read them. Then I found a novella that Dan Simmons set in the same universe as the Hyperion Cantos, and that was my second read of the month, and this novella is called The Orphans of the Helix. I gave this novella 4 stars out of 5. This story happens about 480 years after the epilogue of Rise of Endymion, and it is still a mix of genres with hard sci-fi at the core of it. It follows a very special human culture, the Amoyete Spectrum Helix, which is an independent civilization, very egalitarian, philosophical and peaceful. And one of the most particular thing about the Amoyete Spectrum Helix people is that they have tripartite marriages as the norm. Those are marriages with 3 people instead of 2, and they welcome queer couples with either 2 females and 1 male, or 2 males and 1 female in each tripartite marriage, which can form all the romantic and sexual relationships that you could imagine between the 3 of them. And this is how they imagine families could be the most peaceful and balanced, by this combination of people and different romantic and sexual relationship and interactions. Previously persecuted by central cultures who were hostile to their beliefs and queer families, the Amoyete Spectrum Helix people now have the opportunity to explore the far ends of the galaxy and beyond, and so they packed a huge ship with almost all their fellows Amoyete and went in space to build a new colony even more independent than they used to be from the rest of humanity. and the rest is to be read by you. This was a short, fun and intelligent, fluffy read, which I really liked. Wasn't super original, but I was really happy to see more of the Armoyete people, because this is one of my favorite culture in the Hyperion Cantor story. I really liked them in the main books, and even if this novella isn't really essential for the whole Hyperion Cantor story, I think it was a nice conclusion to it, as it provides kind of an alternative and interesting vision to its happy ending. So if you've already read the whole Hyperion Cantors, or when you've finished reading them, I still would advise you to find the Orphans of the Helix and to read it. Number 3, I read a nice little thriller by Brianna Labuskes. This is not an easy one to say. She is a young author I didn't know about before, and whose book It Ends With Her I discovered via Amazon First Reads as the selection for the month. I gave this little book 3 stars out of 5 because though it was nice, I wasn't 100% happy with it. The story follows FBI agent Clare, a very messed up woman suffering from PTSD, and her best friend and mentor on their investigation against the serial killer whose obsessions are closely linked to Agent Clare herself. This book offers quite an interesting depiction of several mental health issues and a heart-wrenching depiction of domestic abuse. And because of its very heavy content, I guess it's important to say that you might expect all the trigger warnings that you can imagine about abuse, violence, rape, torture and suicide, so be warned. But if this type of heavy content is readable for you, then you'll be immersed in a very fast-paced investigation, though it's sometimes a bit too cliché in my opinion. Parallel to investigation, we've also followed 2 other points of view. One girl suffering from domestic abuse and the childhood of the killer viewed by his adoptive sister. So the 3 point of views, the one by FBI agent Clark and Clare and the 2 other point of views that I just mentioned, they all are female point of view. The last part of the book, where all the 3 storylines are tied up together, was unfortunately quite predictable in my opinion, and at the same time a bit unrealistic, which brought me to give this book only 3 stars. Yet if you like creepy thrillers and aren't bugged by the ending being a bit meh, I still recommend it because it was genuinely creepy and well paced. And on a side note, I quite liked the fact that there was a gay couple of older men that felt quite realistic, and both in its flaws and dynamic was quite endearing. Number 4, I then listened to the audiobook of More Than This by author Patrick Ness. Despite having heard lots of positive things about his books and having loved the film adaptation of A Monster Calls, I still hadn't read him before. My library had this book as an audiobook, so I was happy to have something presumably good to listen to while I was painting. The narrator was excellent, I loved his voice, but I ended up giving the story only 3.5 stars out of 5 because the ending felt a bit disappointing to me. This book mixes sci-fi, magical realism and a contemporary coming-of-age story, but though I was quite excited for this mix of genres, it ended up being a little bit of a hit and miss for me. This is the story of Seth, a British teenage boy who lives in the US. When the book starts, he has an accident and then wakes up in a black coffin in his childhood house back in the UK. He's alone, dressed in rags, hungry, thirsty and scared. And he tries to understand how and why he ended up here and how it all ties up with the events that preceded his accident. The story alternates between Seth reminiscing of his normal life before the accident and Seth trying to survive in a world which looks more and more broken and surreal. And while the depictions of friendship, young gay love and all the very diverse cast and characters are really, really great, I felt that the sci-fi elements were a bit, wrong, both unnecessary, mysterious and a bit too simplistic. I think I would have preferred if it were only contemporary and magical realism because the sci-fi elements felt like they were written by someone who doesn't read sci-fi for someone who doesn't read sci-fi, if you know what I mean. So basically not me. But because the rest of the book is so good, if you're not a huge sci-fi reader or if you don't mind its flaws, then go for it. It's well written, very, very diverse, mysterious and fast-paced, and a book I would especially recommend to teens and young adults. Number 5, the next book that I read was The Small Hand by Susan Hill. I listened to this as an audiobook too, not knowing what it was about at all, except that the author had written The Woman in Black, a ghost story which film adaptation I had seen and liked, even if it wasn't amazing nor really frightening. I gave this book 3.5 stars out of 5, and that's because it's a good ghost story, very British, but neither original nor frightening. This is a short story of an antiquarian book dealer who, taking a wrong turn while driving to a client, finds himself in the garden of an abandoned Edwardian mansion. He makes a paranormal encounter while standing near its pond, and from then becomes haunted. As the ending is a bit flat and predictable, don't expect this book to be really frightening and don't expect to be surprised by this one. Yet I insist on the fact that it's still a pleasurable, quick, spooky read and in the very tradition of British ghost stories. So I recommend it if you're not a horror fan, or if you like less creepy ghost stories as well as real horrible stuff, I guess. So, as I said, still pleasurable, not frightening, but quite good. Number 6, I next read City of Glass by Cassandra Clare, the third book in the first Immortal Instruments trilogy. And yes, this is Shadowhunters. No, I didn't think I would ever read it. Well, to be fair, I listened to it on an audiobook, but that's the same thing, except that I could work at the same time. But anyways, I ended up giving this book 4 stars out of 5. So I guess I liked it pretty much. If you don't know what this is all about, this Shadowhunter thing, let's sum it up very quickly. Clare, a teenage girl from New York, sees her world change radically when her single mother disappears and she is saved by magical warriors. Those warriors are Shadowhunters, who share the blood of the angel Raziel and fight demons while maintaining peace with the Downworlders, fairy folks, vampires, and the like. Of course, more trouble ensues as Clare discovers that she is, in fact, related to the Shadowhunters world in many ways. And loads of it happens. While this is far from being original, the world Cassandra Clare created is fun and action-packed. So that's one of its main qualities. But I can't stand love triangles, which is why I didn't like book 2 of this trilogy at all, as nothing much than love drama happened in it. City of Glass, however, was mostly action, answers to all the questions, magic, new interesting characters, friendship, and finally less love drama. And I'm not sure it really deserves 4 stars, but I was quite into the story by then and happy that it was interesting, so I don't know. I liked it, okay? I liked it. And as always with Cassandra Clare's universe, my favourite character was flamboyant warlock Magnus Bane. Because he's both bisexual and a badass, and in the end, he always saves the day. 7. I read Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, first book of the Infernal Devices trilogy and part of the Shadowhunters universe too. But hang on. I gave this book 4 stars out of 5, and those were much more fully deserved than for City of Glass, because everything in this book was actually an improvement compared to the first trilogy. Clockwork Angel is well written, the action is well paced, the dynamic between the characters is more believable and lovable, the secondary characters have a background of their own and real identities too, and there were no MacGuffins to find as an excuse for a plot. Basically, this was a good YA fantasy book. It focuses on Tessa Gray, 19th century teenage girl from New York who sees her world change radically when her brother and only family disappears and she's saved by magical warriors. Those are Shadowhunters who share the blood of Angel Raziel and fight demons while maintaining peace with the Downworlders, fairy folks, vampires and the like. Wait, what? Did I already say that? Huh. Yes. I know, at first I too thought that it was just a retell of City of Bones, the first Mortal Instruments book. But this is far from it. It actually almost feels like City of Bones was the retell, or if it was a rough sketch and Clockwork Angel was the actual proper finished piece. I liked many of the characters here and their own subplots. It was also more violent and tragic, and it happened in the 19th century London, so what more could you ask? Oh, and there was also Magnus Bane to be accounted for. So yeah, for Magnus Bane. I'll tell you in my next wrap-up how I liked the rest of the trilogy, but yeah, so far I might really recommend you to read Clockwork Angel. Number 8. I read a novella again. This one is called Rocannon's World and it is by Ursula Le Guin. Sorry if I said it really wrong. I gave this short story 3.5 stars because it's one of her first books and it's certainly flawed. But guys, this is Ursula Le Guin, which means that this was far more intelligent and deep than it looks. A good number of anthropological interests were already visible here, and if, as it is often described, this is a heroic fantasy disguised as sci-fi story, then, in my opinion, it's even more ethnology and philosophy disguised as heroic fantasy, disguised as sci-fi. As a matter of fact, it follows ethnologist Garol Rocannon, sent on planet Fomalhaut 2 at the other end of the galaxy to establish contact with the diverse populations and cultures who live there. He needs to get a better understanding of those hominoids after a first era of aggressive and dismissive colonization, which left them quite vulnerable. The pace of it was a bit weird and uneven at times, but seriously, go read Ursula Le Guin. She always writes really intelligent books that make you think. And 9, finally, I read Strange the Dreamer, first book of the duology by Laini Taylor. And I gave this wonderful book 5 stars out of 5 because it was simply amazing. I've discovered Laini Taylor with her series Daughter of Smoke and Bones, and I think she writes better and better with every book. If you haven't read it yet, which I know can happen, this is a YA high fantasy story about a young man, Laszlo Strange, an orphan obsessed with a mysterious city which lost its name when he was still a small child. While he is the only one still remembering that the city used to have a name and still recalls the sensation of it being erased from everyone's memory, he works as a librarian and dreams of epic adventures. This book is a tale about books, destiny, the beauty of one's brain and soul, being brave, growing up, and being loyal to one's beliefs and country. This is also a story about racism, abuse, colonialism, slavery. It's a story about love, death, friendship, and hope. It's an incredibly epic, fun, generous, tragic, romantic, and magical book. And there's even some fluffy girls who like girls' romance too. I even liked the main love story and was heartbroken and shocked by the ending. And I can't wait for the next book to be released on October 2018. And I don't want to tell you more about this book because what I want really is that you read this book or reread it because I loved it. Read Laini Taylor, read Strange the Dreamer. And there we are. In June, my favorite book was Strange the Dreamer, which is quite obvious, though there were many other books that were really good. I'd also like to add that I didn't used to read so much YA fantasy in the past, and I have just discovered the concept recently thanks to BookTube mainly, and thus was introduced to many wonderful authors that I didn't know existed, and I want to read them all now. Generally, I'm more of a sci-fi, mystery, horror reader, and adult reader at that, but I love discovering new genres, and above all, I love discovering new female authors and books with LGBTIQ characters, so expect lots of those in here in the future. If you've read one of the books I've talked about, please tell me if you like them in the comments below. Don't hesitate to list the books that you've read recently so that I can discover new interesting novels. And I hope you liked this new type of illustrated book review. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so that you won't miss my next video. Till then, enjoy both art and books, my friends. Bye!